Welcome to Executives at the Edge, a podcast brought to you by MEF. I'm your host, Pascal Menezes. Join me as we explore thought-provoking perspectives from the leaders and changemakers who are propelling enterprise digital transformation forward. Well, I'm really excited to have Aaron Dunn, Director of Research Services, Vertical Systems. Welcome, Aaron, to Executives at the Edge. Really excited about all this network as a service, and I know you're going to give us some great insights. So, Aaron, if you can please tell us a little bit about yourself and Vertical Systems, that would be really great.
Well, I'm excited to be here also. We all love a good podcast, don't we? As you just said, Aaron Dunn, Vertical Systems Group, I direct the research practice. And I have been doing this for longer than I care to admit. The company has been around since 1986, right after divestiture, and we focus on wireline data services. And so really squarely in line with the genesis of MEF when it was the Metro Ethernet Forum. And then as that forum has evolved to take on other interesting topics, so have we. So we focus on the types of services that enterprise customers like to buy from network vendors, network service providers, and pay them, a monthly fee. And that has changed so much over the last 20 years. And NaaS right now, which is the topic of this podcast, is kind of the culmination of what we've seen over the last many years as service providers have rolled out service after service after service to meet the evolving needs of enterprise customers. So, as I said, I direct the research practice here, and we target and our syndicated research to service providers, equipment vendors, Wall Street is doing a lot of M&A, and some very high-end enterprise customers that treat their networks like a service provider would. So we focus on market shares and a lot of quantitative analysis of these markets. So fits right in with what's happening here with NaaS being an emerging service that we're not seeing a lot of revenue yet, but certainly very much high on the hype factor and very much high on the, attention of everyone in this industry.
Yeah, so thank you, Aaron. That is a great introduction. And your point about it's not yet fully adopted, it's been 10 years we've been talking about NaaS. But really, at the end of the day, I think there are a lot of managed services, and
Correct.
There are a lot of services offered, we even on site that are managed and from the cloud managed. And I don't think they have a label called NaaS. So maybe if you add all that in, it's kind of like the early days, or I don't know how to call that. But anyways, let's just talk about what is NaaS and like what's triggering this migration.
Right. So I think I have an interesting way, and it comes from the way my company researches these types of services. And I think if we look at that evolution, as you just said, or migration, if you look at there's legacy services that are still out there. I mean, we hate to talk about them, but you have Frame, ATM, you have private lines, they're still there. It's, couple $1 billion worth of revenue, not a lot, but they're still there. So I'd call that kind of services, 1.0 maybe. Then you roll into the next stage of managed services that really required the type of direction that MEF is really good at giving, like Ethernet, like SD-WAN, like Ethernet, like MPLS, like the VPNs that are still out there. And you're talking billions, $50 billion worth of revenue. Then we've moved into, 3.0, do you want to call it? We have SD-WAN, we have SSE, we have SASE, we have all these different types of acronyms that take the legacy style managed services to the next level by adding automation, by adding all of the different sort of bells and whistles that customers are really interested in. And now we have network as a service. So I think your question is really great, is are we already there? Can we call these type of very intelligent managed services that we already see out there in the market network as a service? Or are we looking for the next interesting thing? to lay over?
Sounds like you don't have the answer.
I just asked you.
So, yeah, I think that, NaaS, that the way the network as a service, well, let's just back up. For a long time, enterprises being, bringing in capital equipment and asking someone to manage it. So
Sure.
it's one model. And they'd be bringing in and saying that was wrong for decades, that you buy a bunch of equipment and someone would have to manage it. Well, of course, the IT staff, but they would also outsource part of that networking part and say, hey, you manage all that network gear. So that's probably the earliest iteration of this kind of managed model. And then we see, the idea that more and more they're trying to manage that from some remote location. And so that starts the idea of clouds. And then we're seeing this IT migration to clouds, certainly since COVID. And now everybody's used to their IT sitting in clouds. So now we're starting to think, well, why can't networks kind of sit, in the cloud?
In the cloud.
And now the destination is not data centers and sites. It's basically clouds. And so the question now becomes, what is network as a service? And I think MEF has defined it as, this underlay where you can buy underlays anywhere in the world and get it at cloud-like speeds on demand, be able to scale up and down. And then you have all the overlay technology of SD-WAN, as you know, and then cybersecurity is coming very hot. Everybody's talking about cybersecurity, SASE, the new buzzword out there, SSE, Zero Trust. And then you talk about all multi-clouds, because not one enterprise deals with just one cloud. And I think all of that bundled together into a commercial model that is by like a utility, is, to me, why NaaS has suddenly become top of mind. It's that utility. It's that the enterprise is buying from clouds already, very used to clouds. And I think NaaS a decade ago wasn't like that. It was a completely different description to where it is now. Those are my thoughts. So
that
your thoughts.
I think those are great. I would agree, and I very much want all of that to be the case as we work to get to that point. I think the very natural shift of, as you alluded to, the CapEx to the operating to the OpEx type of model. Let's shift that revenue stream to a different to operating expenses is really valuable to a lot of folks. I have a couple of interesting comments that as I dug into some of our research and some of the very, very current feedback that I've been seeing from the vendors and the service providers. First of all, I'm honored to be on the MEF judging panel for the upcoming awards. And very few of those awards are focused on NaaS, whether it's services, whether it's Outlook, what are you doing right now, and all of those different kind of things. So I've had the ability to read through and see what service providers and equipment vendors are talking about. And it's really interesting. They resonate with what you were just saying, but the connection to everything, ultimate reach, the underlay and the overlay, automation, software only, lots of different partners. And I find that to be very interesting. API driven, the flexibility, 24/7, all of that. And so then I take those definitions or those kind of characterizations of NaaS, and then I overlay it with what we're seeing from some of the surveys that we're doing when we specifically ask, what are the challenges that you see in the managed services market with SASE, with SD-WAN, with NaaS? And the challenges always come back to scaling is hard, APIs are hard, partners are hard, the frequency of releases are hard. And so I find it very interesting that the challenges that the service providers are citing, that they're really focused on over the next, let's say, year to 18 months, are directly in line with the type of rollouts that NaaS is that the market is promising. So, having all said that, and not to sound negative at all, because it certainly is not, I think this leads to, first of all, the MEF being more important than ever, because if this is not standardized, we're not going anywhere. It's just too hard. And so rolling out the standards and having the adoption of the standards by the vendors, by the cloud providers, the hyperscalers, the WAN providers, the telcos, you name it. And then being able to work together to create this ecosystem of network as a service is we can get there. And but I think it's going to be a lot of work and a very, very step-by-step process. We really have to work all together. And that is going to be incredibly difficult as this scales. We really need the type of standards and I guess management, I would call it, of the entire ecosystem that MEF is looking to help with.
Yeah, and if you think about it, that's exactly what our journey has been, Aaron, for the 6+ years I've been the CTO. Is maybe subconsciously we didn't realize it, but we've been automating both the business and the operational aspects, now blockchain, so to give you that cloud-like experience to scale up and down. And then we've been adding all kinds of services going up the stack. That's the first thing I said, automate up the stack when I started.
Up the stack.
CTO, yep. And, we define layer 1 connectivity service. We defined carrier Ethernet for sure for 2 decades. We then defined IP services, which was kind of strange because IETF has really done a lot of that work, but no one's ever defined a service definition with attributes. So we did that. And then we did SD-WAN. First time ever in history, there was a standardization, with SD-WAN. They started in 2012. And then we went and defined SASE and Zero Trust, and we keep going up the stack. So I think the standardization of the service behaviors, the APIs and the automation aspects and the blockchains, and then additionally, the certifications we have coming out with, SASE SD-WAN certification, not just on a standard, but really does threats, does a provider, a vendor, does it really live up to protecting threats, and does it perform correctly in traffic steering and application performance degradations? And all this stuff is in the certifications that we're bringing out to market. And then additionally, you look at what we're doing is we're pulling the ecosystem together, and that is huge, as you mentioned. Huge. And all of this is, we now put it under an umbrella called NaaS.
Right.
I think we've been doing parts of it, not realizing what we were building, but now we realize the market wants and calling it something. It's called NaaS. And if you think about utilities, we buy utilities every time, water utilities, power utilities. They do something masterful. They sell it to us as a service, and they do all the upgrades. They do all the management. They deliver the high availability, the uptimes, and they make sure it works correctly. Like, I don't get water with pathogens in it. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
but that's their responsibility. So the bandwidth should be same thing, free of pathogens. So it gets to my question is, so are NaaS solutions better, cheaper, faster, easier, and more trustworthy than other options currently available?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. And if NaaS delivers, it certainly will address the challenges that customers are seeing, providers are seeing with the current managed services market. And so building this ecosystem certainly gives the opportunity for that kind of utopia of network as a service. And anyone that's new to this industry, we love cloud-based services. I love hitting my phone and having things just happen. But going back to that utility kind of comment you just made, the only time we get irritated with utilities is when you can't get them, right? So the starting point here is you got to make sure, as you said, starting with layer 1, that you have the access. And once you have the access, and it works, and you get the proper bandwidth and the proper SLA that is required, then yes, I really do think as we work harder on going up the stack, that NaaS does fulfill the promise of being the better, faster, cheaper type of service. I mean, I'm bullish on this because, again, it really can address a lot of the issues as long as you can get the access. And that, of course, is always the number one issue. And once you're there, I look to all of the folks in the software industry, in the chip industry, in the standards type of industries to help us build these out, because as we all know, and we've been saying this, God, I want to say every conference or every panel I've been on for I don't know how many years is, first of all, we're waiting for the killer application. Well, it's here, which is everything's in the cloud. And then the other concept was, how do we get it all to the cloud? Well, it's there. So I think this is what we need to get to the next step, which is network as a service.
Yeah, well, thank you, Aaron. I think you're spot on, and thank you for your great articulation about NaaS. And we're very excited for our G&E event coming out here, our global NaaS event in early October in Dallas. And I think you're going to see some very, very key, great presentations, keynotes, some great insights. Also, there'll be the LSO Summit, the Lifecycle Service Orchestration Summit on automation on the Monday, which will talk about how does the ecosystem plug together in an automated machine-to-machine way so that everything responds in real time. And, that's really critical. You can't have a NaaS where something, you want to change something, do something, and then all of a sudden it depends on a partner ecosystem or a supply chain that can take months. That to me is not NaaS.
That is not NaaS. I mean, NaaS is all the partners working together and these type of changes happening in quick order. I'm also looking forward to the awards because, as I said, being on that judging panel, there's a lot of really interesting submissions there for these different types of services. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that shakes out.
Well, you get to see all of that. We're all hidden from that. We don't have any.
I got you. Well, good. It's good you're hidden.
Yeah, it's completely a third party, awards that MEF does not interfere with. We let the analysts figure out best of everything. So again, Aaron, thank you so much for your great insight. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to seeing you at the G&E. And again, thank you once again.
Thanks, Pascal. Bye-bye.